Captain Adrian Locke never expected much from interstellar politics. The invitation to the Trison Interstellar Diplomatic Conference came as a surprise, arriving on his personal console with little fanfare. He didn't even recognize the name Trison 4 at first, just another outpost on the fringes of known space. Still, the message had been official enough to catch his attention. A chance to represent humanity in a neutral alien setting. Trison 4, muttered Adrian as he reviewed the planetary profile. Barren terrain, sparse settlements, and a ruling monarchy that's been closed off to outsiders for decades. This ought to be interesting. Adrian, said a voice from behind him. Are you sure about this? The last time we got involved in alien diplomacy, you nearly got spaced. Adrian turned to see his friend and second-in-command, Chief Engineer Cal Dorn, leaning against the bulkhead with a skeptical expression. Cal, a gruff man with close-cropped hair and a permanently furrowed brow, had been with Adrian through more than a few rough scrapes. He wasn't the type to get overly sentimental, but he also wasn't one to hide his concerns. I'm sure, Adrian replied, rubbing the back of his neck. I've got orders from Earth's delegation to attend. It's an opportunity, Cal. Humanity needs allies out here. Sure, allies. Cal crossed his arms. What are the odds these Trisons even give us the time of day? I read their files. They don't like outsiders. What makes you think they'll listen to a scrappy human captain? Adrian offered a small grin. Because I'm persistent, Cal groaned. Persistent doesn't count for much if they lock you in a cell the moment you land. They won't. I've got credentials, and I'm not going in alone. You're coming with me. Me? Cal raised an eyebrow. I'm an engineer, not a diplomat. You're also the only person I trust to tell me when I'm about to put my foot in it, Adrian said. Besides, you've got that charm. People like you. Cal let out a dry chuckle. Charm, huh? Well, if you insist. But don't blame me when this whole thing turns into a disaster. The landing on Trison 4 went smoothly enough, but Adrian quickly realized that the planet was as inhospitable as the reports suggested. The air was heavy with a metallic tang, and the landscape was dominated by jagged cliffs and dark, glittering sand. Trisani architecture reflected the environment. Low, sprawling structures built from the same dark stone, their interiors cool and dimly lit. The conference hall was grand, though in its own austere way. Its arched ceilings and carved pillars hinted at the Trisani monarchy's wealth and power, even if the exterior was understated. Adrian and Cal stood at the entrance, taking in the scene. Delegates from various alien species moved through the hall, their distinct forms adding color to the otherwise muted surroundings. Adrian recognized a few familiar faces, envoys from the Sinular Coalition and the Vestali Trade Network, but many were entirely new to him. Captain Locke, a voice called, sharp and authoritative. Adrian turned to see a tall Trisani official in flowing robes approaching them. The man's scaled face and intense blue eyes were striking, and he moved with a confidence that left no room for doubt about his importance. I am Emil, High Liaison to Her Royal Highness Princess Saralyn. You are here on behalf of humanity. That's right, Adrian said, extending a hand. Emil didn't take it, instead giving a slight nod. You will follow me, Emil said. Her Highness has been informed of your arrival. Cal leaned in, muttering, friendly bunch, aren't they? Adrian just shrugged and followed Emil through the labyrinthine hallways. The corridors were lined with intricate mosaics, alien symbols and depictions of historical events that Adrian couldn't begin to decipher. He tried not to stare, though he caught Cal doing a double-take at a particularly vivid panel showing what looked like a massive winged creature battling a group of armored Trisani warriors. They were led into a spacious chamber that was both elegant and imposing. At the far end, seated on a high-backed throne of gleaming obsidian, was Princess Saralyn herself. She wore a flowing golden garment that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, and her posture was as regal as her title suggested. Adrian noted the subtle ridges along her forearms, an evolutionary trait of her species, and the bright gold of her eyes. She regarded him with a cold, assessing gaze, as if trying to determine whether he was worth her attention. Adrian inclined his head respectfully. Your Highness. Sarah Lynn didn't respond immediately. Her eyes flicked from Adrian to Cal and then back again. You are Captain Adrian Locke, she said finally. Her voice was measured with a faint, musical quality to it. Yes, Adrian replied, keeping his tone polite. This is my chief engineer, Cal Dorn. Cal nodded but said nothing. Sarah Lynn leaned back slightly. You requested an audience. With respect, ma'am, I was invited here as part of the delegation from Earth, Adrian said. I'm here to listen, learn, and hopefully build a constructive relationship. There was a faint twitch at the corner of her mouth, perhaps the closest she would come to a smile. You speak as if you expect to be welcomed with open arms. Adrian met her gaze evenly. I don't expect anything, Your Highness. I'm here because I believe we can find common ground. But if that's not possible, I'll respect your decision. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You are an unusual human, Captain. We shall see if your actions speak as well as your words. Emil stepped forward, cutting off any further exchange. Her Highness has other matters to attend to. This audience is concluded. Adrian bowed his head again. Thank you, Your Highness. As they turned to leave, Cal murmured under his breath. So, what do you think? She seemed aloof. Aloof, yes, Adrian said, a faint smile playing on his lips. But curious. I'd say we made an impression. An impression? Sure. I just hope it's the kind that doesn't get us tossed out before we can even get started. Adrian chuckled. That's why I brought you along, to keep me grounded. Together, they walked out of the chamber and back into the twisting corridors, their footsteps echoing faintly in the still air. Adrian knew the real challenge was just beginning. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Offer. Adrian and Cal spent the next day weaving their way through the sprawling conference halls, meeting representatives from more alien species than either of them had seen in one place before. Some were cordial, others curt, and a few outright dismissive. The delegates from the Vestali Trade Network showed mild interest in Earth's technological advancements, while the Sinular Coalition envoys were more concerned with interstellar trade routes than human diplomacy. What are we even doing here, Adrian? Cal muttered as they paused near a food station. Alien dishes in strange hues and textures lined the counters, steam rising from bubbling soups and pans of roasted meats, or what Adrian hoped was meat. Trying to make friends, Adrian replied, grabbing something that looked vaguely like a fruit, or at least acquaintances. If we leave here with just one ally, it'll be worth the trip. Cal snorted, eyeing a platter of shiny green orbs. Easier said than done. So far, no one wants to even share a drink with us, let alone discuss alliances. They'll come around. Give it time, Adrian said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. As they finished eating and moved toward the next discussion hall, a Trisani attendant intercepted them. Captain Locke, the attendant said, bowing slightly. Her Highness Princess Sarah Lynn requests your presence in the private council chamber. Adrian raised an eyebrow. She requested me by name? Yes, the attendant replied, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Well, that's unexpected, Adrian said. He glanced at Cal. Guess I'll see what she wants. Hold down the fort here. Fine, Cal said. But if you're not back in an hour, I'm coming in after you. Adrian followed the attendant through the winding corridors until they reached a large, ornate doorway. 2 Trisani guards stood on either side, their gilded armor gleaming under the soft light. The doors opened silently, revealing a smaller, more intimate chamber than the grand throne room. Sarah Lynn stood near a massive window that overlooked the barren expanse of Trisan Ivy's surface. She turned as Adrian entered, her golden robes catching the light. Captain Locke, she said, her voice as measured as before. Thank you for coming. You asked for me, Your Highness, Adrian said, keeping his tone respectful. What can I do for you? She gestured for him to approach. I've been observing the delegates' interactions with your people. Humanity's approach to diplomacy is unique. Is that a polite way of saying we're not very good at it? Adrian asked with a faint smile. Sarah Lynn tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes narrowing. On the contrary, I find your methods refreshing. Most species come here with rigid agendas, unwilling to adapt. You, however, seem willing to listen and learn. That's the goal, Adrian said. We're the newcomers here. It'd be foolish to act like we have all the answers. Sarah Lynn's lips quirked into what might have been a smile. Such humility is rare among those who seek power. Adrian hesitated, then said, I'm not here to seek power, Your Highness. I'm here to represent humanity and, hopefully, find common ground with other civilizations. She regarded him for a moment before stepping closer. Your words are intriguing, Captain. I am willing to offer you an opportunity to prove your sincerity. Adrian raised an eyebrow. What kind of opportunity? Tomorrow, there will be a closed discussion among the key delegates. An informal meeting where candid opinions are exchanged, away from the public eye. I will grant you access to this meeting under one condition. And that condition is? Adrian asked. You must bring another member of your delegation, Sarah Lynn said. Someone who can vouch for your intentions. Adrian thought for a moment, then nodded. I'll bring Cal. He's been my second-in-command for years, and he's as honest as they come. Very well, Sarah Lynn said. You and your companion will meet me here tomorrow at midday. I suggest you prepare thoroughly. The discussions can be intense. Understood, Adrian said. Thank you, Your Highness. We won't let you down. Sarah Lynn's expression softened, just slightly. I hope that you do not. As Adrian exited the chamber, he couldn't help but wonder what had prompted Sarah Lynn's sudden interest. Whatever her reasons, he knew one thing. This was the break they'd been waiting for. Now all he had to do was ensure they made the most of it. Chapter 3: The Tipping Point. The next morning, Adrian and Cal met early in the small quarters they'd been assigned within the conference compound. The room was stark, with little more than 2 bunks, a table, and a window offering a view of Trison Ivy's uninviting landscape. I'm telling you, Adrian, Cal said as he paced the length of the room. This whole setup feels off. Why would the princess suddenly give us the golden ticket to the inner circle? Adrian leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Maybe she sees something she likes. Maybe she thinks we're different from the others. Different, sure? Cal stopped pacing and pointed at Adrian. But that's not always a good thing. What if she's setting us up for failure? Adrian shook his head. I don't think so. If she wanted us gone, she could have denied us access in the first place. I think she's genuinely curious about what we bring to the table. Cal let out a heavy sigh. Fine, if you say so, but I've got a bad feeling about walking into a room full of species that think we're nothing but a bunch of backwater nobodies. Then let's prove them wrong, Adrian said with a small grin. We're not here to beg or boast. We're here to have a conversation. If we stay calm, keep things straightforward, and show we're willing to work with them, they'll come around. You make it sound so easy, Cal muttered, sitting down on the edge of his bunk. I'm not saying it'll be easy, Adrian replied, but it's a start. When they arrived at the private council chamber, Sarah Lynn was already there, flanked by her ever-present guards. A few of the other delegates had trickled in as well, their varying sizes and shapes making the room feel more crowded than it actually was. Captain Locke, Sarah Lynn greeted him as he approached. Her gaze flicked to Cal. And this must be your second in command. Cal Dorn, Cal said, giving a stiff nod. Sarah Lynn studied him briefly, then inclined her head. Thank you for attending. I trust you are both prepared for what lies ahead. As much as we can be, Adrian replied. The room gradually filled, the hum of quiet conversations growing louder until Sarah Lynn raised a hand, calling for order. The delegates turned their attention to her, the air thick with anticipation. We are gathered here, she began, her voice calm yet commanding, to discuss matters that cannot be resolved in the public forum. This is a space for honesty, for open dialogue. Let us begin. Adrian listened intently as one delegate after another aired their grievances and proposed solutions. A Vestali representative argued passionately for stricter trade regulations, while a Signaler envoy pushed back, insisting that such measures would stifle interstellar commerce. The debates were sharp, but not hostile. Everyone in the room seemed to understand the importance of maintaining a constructive atmosphere. When it was Adrian's turn to speak, he chose his words carefully. "Humanity may be new to these discussions," he said, his voice steady. "But we're here because we believe in working together. We don't have the resources or the influence that many of you do, but we do have ideas, solutions that could benefit everyone, not just our own species." "And what solutions might those be?" asked a towering, six-limbed delegate from the Crithari Confederation. Adrian glanced at Cal, who gave him a slight nod. They'd discussed this beforehand. "One of our strengths is adaptability," Adrian said. "On Earth, we've faced countless challenges, from environmental crises to technological shifts. Each time we've had to think outside the box, find unconventional solutions. That's what we offer. A fresh perspective, a willingness to try new approaches. New approaches often lead to chaos," the Crithari replied, their voice a low rumble. "Not if they're carefully considered," Cal interjected. "Adrian and I aren't suggesting we throw out the rules. We're saying that sometimes the best way forward is to blend tradition with innovation." There was a murmur of agreement from a few of the delegates, and even the Crithari seemed to consider Cal's words. Sarah Lynn watched the exchange closely, her expression unreadable. "Captain Locke," she said after a moment, "you and your companions speak with conviction, but words alone will not persuade those here to trust you. What actions do you propose?" Adrian nodded, having anticipated this question. "We propose starting small. Let us collaborate on a pilot project, a joint effort between human and alien specialists. Something manageable, where we can demonstrate our commitment and our capability." "What sort of project?" a Vestali representative asked. Adrian hesitated briefly, then said, "A cooperative trade initiative. We work with a few key partners to streamline cargo transport between Earth and neighboring systems. It's a simple, practical goal that benefits everyone." The room fell silent as the delegates considered his proposal. Sarah Lynn's gaze lingered on Adrian, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she nodded. "I will support this initiative, provided the other delegates agree. Let us put it to a vote." The results were mixed. Some delegates voiced support, others skepticism, but enough were willing to give the pilot project a chance. Adrian and Cal exchanged a relieved glance as the meeting concluded. As the delegates filed out, Sarah Lynn approached them. "Your proposal was well received, Captain," she said. "Do not waste this opportunity." "We won't," Adrian assured her. "Thank you for giving us a chance." She studied him for a moment, then turned and walked away. Cal waited until she was out of earshot before muttering, "Well, that went better than expected." "Yeah," Adrian said, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "But now comes the hard part, making it work." Cal clapped him on the shoulder. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Together, they left the chamber, ready to face the challenges ahead. Chapter 4. A Dangerous Accord. As the pilot trade initiative moved into its early stages, Adrian and Cal found themselves traveling between Trison 4 and a nearby neutral station where the initial cargo exchanges would take place. The station, an older structure known as Tyran Delta, was known for its haphazard organization and a loose interpretation of safety regulations. "Remind me again why we had to pick this place," Cal muttered as they walked down a dimly lit corridor. The metal walls were grimy, and a few overhead lights flickered erratically. "It's a miracle this thing hasn't fallen out of orbit." "It's neutral ground," Adrian replied, glancing around. "No one's got an advantage here. That's the whole point. If we can make this work in a place like Tyran Delta, it'll prove our model is solid." Cal sighed. "Sure, but I'd rather prove it somewhere that doesn't look like it's about to collapse." The two entered a makeshift conference room where a handful of representatives from the participating species were already waiting. A Trisani logistics officer, a Vestali transport coordinator, and a Signaler trade delegate sat around the table. Their varied appearances highlighted the diversity of the coalition. The Trisani's scaled skin gleamed under the fluorescent lights, The Vestali's smooth, porcelain-like features contrasted sharply with the room's gritty surroundings, and the Signalers' segmented, insectoid limbs clicked faintly as they moved. Adrian greeted them with a nod. "Thank you all for coming. I know this isn't the most glamorous location, but it's the first step. If we can establish trust and reliability here, we'll have a foundation to expand on. Let's just hope the cargo isn't as unstable as the station," Cal muttered under his breath, earning a sharp look from Adrian. The group began discussing the details of the trade routes, with Adrian and Cal handling the human side of operations. The Trisani officer provided insights into secure loading protocols, the Vestali representative detailed their efficient storage techniques, and the Signaler delegate proposed alternative timing schedules to minimize delays. As the conversation went on, Cal leaned closer to Adrian and whispered, "They seem a lot more cooperative now than they did at the conference." "Probably because there's something tangible on the table," Adrian replied. "It's one thing to talk about trade in a council chamber. It's another to actually make it happen." After hours of back-and-forth discussions, the group finally settled on an initial schedule. Adrian looked around the table. "All right, we have our starting framework. I'll personally oversee the first shipment to ensure everything goes smoothly. If there a uke of a choice, do I?" Adrian grinned. "Not really." The first shipment arrived at the station a few days later. Adrian and Cal oversaw the unloading process, working alongside a small crew of human and alien dockworkers. The cargo consisted of advanced alloy materials from Vestali foundries, bound for Trisani shipyards. Cal crouched beside one of the containers, scanning it with a portable device. "This one checks out. Looks like they didn't skimp on quality." "That's a good start," Adrian said, helping secure the container to a hover pallet. As the work continued, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The station was always busy, with individuals of all species passing through, but something felt off. He glanced around, trying to pinpoint the source of his unease. "Adrian," Cal said quietly, "you noticed those two over by the loading bay?" Adrian followed Cal's gaze. Two figures in dark, nondescript clothing stood near the far wall, pretending to inspect a cargo manifest. But their attention kept drifting back to Adrian and Cal. "Yeah," Adrian said, his voice low. "They don't look like they belong here. Keep an eye on them." The rest of the unloading went without incident, and the cargo was soon loaded onto a Trisani freighter bound for their homeworld. As the freighter departed, Adrian and Cal returned to the station's main corridor. "Think they'll follow us?" Cal asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Maybe," Adrian said, "but we're not doing anything shady. If they're watching us, it's probably because they're not used to humans being part of a deal like this." As they reached the residential section of the station, Adrian turned to Cal. "Still think coming here was a bad idea?" Cal smirked. "Yeah, but at least we got the cargo out. That's something." Adrian clapped Cal on the shoulder. "That's the spirit. Now let's go grab a drink before we head back to the conference. I think we've earned it." They walked off toward the station's dimly lit lounge, unaware that the two figures had quietly disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Chapter 5. An unexpected complication. Adrian and Cal returned to Trison 4 to find the mood among the delegates had shifted. What had once been careful optimism was now tinged with suspicion and uncertainty. Emil, Saralin's high liaison, met them as they disembarked. "We have a situation," Emil said, his expression unreadable. Adrian frowned. "What kind of situation?" Emil motioned for them to follow him into the conference compound. "There has been an incident with the first shipment. A container from the initial trade run has gone missing. The Vestali representatives are accusing the Signaler, and the Signaler are pointing fingers at your species." Cal gave a low whistle. "That didn't take long. We oversaw the entire operation," Adrian said firmly. "Everything was accounted for when we left the station." "Perhaps," Emil replied, "but you must understand. Accusations alone can damage the trust you've worked to build. Her Highness wishes to see you immediately." The throne chamber was colder than usual, the cool light from Trison Ivy's twin moons casting long shadows across the room. Princess Saralyn was waiting, her expression as calm as ever, but Adrian could see the tension in the set of her jaw. "Captain Locke," she said as they approached, "I trust you've been informed of the current circumstances." "I have, Your Highness," Adrian replied, "but I assure you my crew and I handled that shipment by the book. We had nothing to do with the missing container." Saralyn's golden eyes locked onto his. "It does not matter what I believe. The others are already talking. Some of them see this as a convenient excuse to derail the initiative. I need solutions, not assurances." Adrian glanced at Cal, who gave him a slight nod before stepping forward. "Your Highness, if we're going to find out what happened, we'll need access to the shipping records. Every manifest, every log entry, and every sensor reading from the station. If something went wrong, the data will show it." Saralyn gestured to Emil, who produced a data tablet. "We have already begun gathering the records. You will have access to them. I expect a full report by tomorrow." "We'll get it done," Adrian said. "You have my word." Saralyn nodded, her gaze softening slightly. "I appreciate your cooperation, Captain. I trust you understand the importance of resolving this matter quickly and quietly." "Yes, Your Highness," Adrian said. "We'll get to the bottom of it." Back in their quarters, Cal spread out the data on a hollow display, frowning as he scrolled through the shipping logs. "Okay, so far everything checks out on our end. The cargo left the station fully accounted for. The Vestali manifest lines up. The Signaler logs are a bit more chaotic, but I don't see anything that screams theft." Adrian rubbed his temples. "Then where the hell did it go?" "Could be a bad sensor reading, a glitch in the tracking system," Cal suggested. "Or maybe someone tampered with the logs after the fact. We need to cross-reference every timestamp." "Great," Adrian muttered. "This'll take all night." "You wanted a chance to prove humanity's worth," Cal said dryly. "Now's your chance." Adrian managed a small smile. "I don't remember asking for sabotage as part of the deal." "Funny how that works," Cal said. "Let's get to it." They worked in silence for hours, poring over every detail. The logs from the Trisani freighter, the station's departure records, the cargo bay surveillance footage, everything seemed to line up, yet the missing container never appeared again after leaving the station. Finally, Cal leaned back with a sigh. "I hate to say it, but we're not going to find it sitting here. We need to talk to someone who was there when it happened." Adrian nodded. "I'll contact Emil and arrange for interviews. Maybe one of the dock workers saw something." "And what about Saralyn?" Cal asked. Adrian hesitated. "She trusts us for now, but if we can't find that container soon, that trust won't mean much. We have to fix this before the entire initiative falls apart." Cal smirked. "No pressure, huh?" "None at all," Adrian said, though his voice lacked humor. "Let's get to it." Chapter 6. Breaking Through. Adrian and Cal spent the next morning gathering the dockworkers who had been present during the loading process. The interviews took place in a small, windowless chamber inside the Trisani compound. It was cramped, and the air carried a faint metallic tang. "Okay," Cal said, leaning against the wall as the first dockworker. A stout, reptilian creature with orange-striped scales settled into the single chair across from them. "Tell us exactly what you saw during the loading process." The dockworker's large eyes blinked slowly. "It was standard procedure," it rasped. "We loaded the containers as directed. The humans supervised. Everything was checked and cleared." "Did anyone approach the shipment after we left?" Adrian asked, arms folded. The dockworker shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. After the freighter departed, I returned to my quarters. I heard nothing else." Adrian exchanged a glance with Cal. "No one unusual hanging around? No strangers accessing the cargo bay?" "No, Captain," the dockworker said, its voice quiet. "Everything seemed normal." "Fine. Thank you. Send the next one in," Adrian said, gesturing toward the door. Cal sighed as the dockworker shuffled out. "They're all going to say the same thing, aren't they?" "Maybe," Adrian said. "But we need to be thorough. Let's hear what the next one has to say." The next worker, a tall, insectoid being with translucent wings, told a similar story. So did the one after that. No one had noticed anything out of the ordinary. Every log entry matched what they remembered seeing. By the time they interviewed the last dockworker, the room felt even smaller than before. Cal leaned back, rubbing his temples. We're chasing our tails here. If someone did take that container, they're covering their tracks too well. Adrian frowned, staring at the empty chair. There's got to be something we're missing. A clue, a detail. Anything that doesn't add up. Cal looked at him. You really think there's a chance this was a mistake? Like, the container wasn't stolen, it just got misplaced somehow. Maybe, Adrian said, though he didn't sound convinced. But if it's a mistake, it's one hell of a coincidence that it happened on the very first shipment. Cal let out a low grunt of agreement. Yeah, it's too convenient. Someone wanted this to happen. They fell into silence, the only sound the faint hum of the station's ventilation system. After a long moment, Adrian stood. Let's look at the logs again. There's something there. I know it. Hours later, Adrian and Cal sat side by side in their quarters, surrounded by glowing holoscreens. They had pulled up every shipping log, every sensor record, and every piece of surveillance footage from the station's cargo bay. There, Cal said suddenly, pointing to one of the displays. Look at the timestamp. See that? Adrian leaned in, narrowing his eyes. That's not right. The freighter was supposed to depart at 1400 hours. But this log entry shows it leaving at 1407. Exactly, Cal said. It sat there for an extra 7 minutes. Long enough for someone to offload a single container without anyone noticing. Adrian finished. They shared a look, a spark of realization passing between them. Let's see what happened in that 7-minute window, Adrian said, pulling up the corresponding surveillance footage. The grainy video showed the cargo bay, the Trisani freighter's ramp still down. The dockworkers moved in and out, securing the last of the shipment. Then, at precisely 1400 hours, the workers filed out and the bay was empty. For the next 7 minutes, nothing seemed to happen. Wait, Cal said. Rewind. Right there. Did you see that shadow? Adrian reversed the footage and slowed it down. A faint, flickering shadow crossed the edge of the camera's field of view. Someone was there, Adrian said quietly. Looks like they knew where the blind spots were, Cal said. Whoever it was, they planned this carefully. Adrian leaned back, his mind racing. We need to find out who had access to the cargo bay during that time. There's a record of everyone who signed in and out. If we cross-reference it with the logs. Cal nodded. It's a start. But if this person covered their tracks this well, they're not going to be easy to catch. Maybe not, Adrian said. But if we can prove someone tampered with the shipment, we can clear our name. That's all we need right now. Cal smirked. You're getting good at this, Captain. Solving mysteries, finding clues. It's like you missed your calling as a detective. Adrian managed a small smile. Let's see if we can crack this case before the entire initiative falls apart. No pressure, right? None at all, Cal said with a chuckle. Let's get to it. They turned back to the holoscreens, determined to uncover the truth behind the missing container. Chapter 7. In the Shadows. After narrowing down the list of names with access to the cargo bay, Adrian and Cal settled on 3 likely suspects. The process had been tedious, combing through hours of personnel logs and comparing them against sensor data, but now they had a lead. I still think the one who came in at 1358 is our best bet, Cal said as they made their way down the dimly lit corridors of the Trisani compound. Why else would someone show up 2 minutes before the freighter was supposed to leave? Hang around just long enough to move one container, and then disappear? Agreed, Adrian said. But we need more than circumstantial timing. We need them to slip up, admit to something, even if it's just a detail they shouldn't know. Their target was a maintenance technician, a wiry Vestali named Lauren. On paper, Lauren had been performing routine maintenance checks on the cargo bay's environmental controls during the time in question. It was a plausible excuse, but the timing was too perfect to ignore. When Adrian and Cal entered the station's maintenance section, they found Lauren hunched over a console, typing rapidly. The Vestali didn't look up as they approached. "Lauren?" Adrian said. "Yes," Lauren replied, still focused on the screen. "I'm Captain Adrian Locke. This is Chief Engineer Cal Dorn. We're with the human delegation." "Ah," Lauren said, finally turning. The Vestali's pale blue eyes flicked between them. "I heard about you too. What can I do for you?" "We're following up on the cargo run from 2 days ago," Adrian said casually. "Just going over the logs, making sure everything checks out." "Everything should be in order," Lauren said. "I'm sure it is," Adrian replied, offering a friendly smile. "But I noticed you were logged into the cargo bay right before the shipment left. Something about environmental control checks." "Yes," Lauren said, the response a little too quick. "Routine checks." "Routine checks at the exact time the cargo was supposed to depart?" Cal interjected, his tone skeptical. Lauren frowned. "It's not unusual. Sometimes I'm called in at the last minute if there's a sensor anomaly or if the environmental regulators need recalibrating." "What kind of recalibration?" Adrian asked. Lauren hesitated. Adjusting the atmospheric balance, ensuring proper pressure levels, standard procedures." "And you didn't see anything out of the ordinary while you were there?" Adrian pressed. "No," Lauren said, avoiding eye contact. "Everything seemed fine." Cal crossed his arms. "Funny thing though, there's no record of a work order for those checks. We double-checked with the station's maintenance logs." Lauren stiffened. I must have been called in informally. Sometimes requests don't go through the official system right away." Adrian leaned in slightly, keeping his voice calm. "Lauren, we're not here to point fingers. We just want to get to the bottom of what happened. If you know anything, if you saw anything, we need you to tell us now." The Vestali looked between Adrian and Cal, clearly uncomfortable. "I don't know anything. I was just doing my job." "Sure," Cal said. "Doing your job right as the container went missing. That's quite the coincidence." Lauren's mandibles twitched, a subtle tell that didn't go unnoticed. Adrian decided to ease the tension. "All right, if that's your final answer, we'll leave it at that. Thanks for your time, Lauren." As they turned to leave, Adrian added casually, "Oh, and if you happen to remember anything, no matter how small, just let us know. It's amazing what details come back to you once you stop thinking so hard." Lauren nodded quickly, but the Vestali's posture remained stiff. Once they were out of earshot, Cal muttered, "He's lying. That much is obvious." "I know," Adrian said, "but we need more than suspicion. We need proof." "Where do we get proof?" "We'll start with his access logs. If we can find out what he was really doing in that cargo bay, we'll have our answer." Cal shook his head. "This just keeps getting better, doesn't it?" Adrian managed a faint smile. "You wanted adventure. Here it is. Next time, remind me to keep my mouth shut." They continued down the corridor, determined to uncover the truth hidden in the station's tangled data. Chapter 8. Finding the Missing Piece. After a restless night sifting through access logs and cross-referencing maintenance reports, Adrian and Cal finally found what they were looking for. Lauren's personal terminal showed a discrepancy. An unexplained data transfer to an off-station location at the exact time the container went missing. "Gotcha," Cal muttered, scrolling through the logs. "Looks like Lauren sent something to a relay point near the asteroid field. Bet you anything that's where our missing container is." Adrian stood over his shoulder, arms crossed. "Then we need to track it down. The relay coordinates are a start, but we'll have to head out there ourselves to confirm." "You're thinking of leaving the station?" Cal asked, glancing up at him. "We don't have much choice. If we can recover the container, we'll have proof that this wasn't some random mistake." Cal sighed. "Great. Another side trip into the unknown. Let's hope your hunch is right." The asteroid field loomed on the edge of Trison IV's star system, a dense cluster of jagged rocks that made navigation tricky. Adrian and Cal piloted a small shuttle from the station, using the relay coordinates to guide them. "Keep an eye on the scanners," Adrian said as he adjusted their approach vector. "Already on it," Cal replied. "So far, I'm seeing a lot of rock and a few abandoned mining outposts, but no sign of the container. As they edged closer to the coordinates, a faint signal began to flicker on the screen. There, Adrian said, pointing. That's it. Boost the signal and see if we can pinpoint the source. Cal adjusted the settings, and the signal became clearer. Looks like it's coming from that cluster of smaller rocks up ahead. I'll bring us in closer. The shuttle weaved through the asteroids, dodging debris until they reached the source of the signal. A small, nondescript cargo pod floated in the shadow of a massive rock. That's our container, Adrian said. Cal brought the shuttle in carefully, matching the pod's drift. Looks intact. Let's see if we can pull it in. Using the shuttle's external clamps, they secured the pod and brought it into the small cargo bay. Once it was on board, Adrian and Cal suited up and stepped into the bay to examine their find. It's sealed, Cal noted, running a scanner over the pod. But all the tracking data matches. This is definitely the one that went missing. Adrian frowned. Why would someone take it out here and just leave it? What's the point of stealing something if you don't actually keep it? Maybe they were planning to pick it up later, Cal suggested. Or maybe they panicked and dumped it. Either way, it doesn't matter. The important thing is we found it. Let's get back to Trison 4 and clear our names. Back at the station, Adrian and Cal presented the recovered container and the logs showing Lauren's involvement. Emil and Sarah Lynn examined the evidence, their expressions unreadable. Impressive work, Captain, Sarah Lynn said after a long pause. You have proven that humanity's involvement in this initiative was not compromised. Thank you, Your Highness, Adrian replied. We're just glad we could clear things up. And what of Lauren? Emil asked. We have enough evidence to confront him, Adrian said. But that's not my call. I'll leave that to you and your security team. Sarah Lynn nodded. Emil, see to it that the matter is handled swiftly and discreetly. We cannot afford further disruptions. Yes, Your Highness, Emil said, bowing. As Emil left the room, Sarah Lynn turned back to Adrian and Cal. You have done well. This initiative would have collapsed without your efforts. We're just doing our part, Adrian said. Sarah Lynn's gaze softened slightly. Perhaps you are. Continue to do so, and you may find yourselves earning more than just our respect. With that, she rose and left the chamber, leaving Adrian and Cal alone. Well, Cal said, letting out a long breath, that was a hell of a mess. But at least we made it out in one piece. Yeah, Adrian agreed. Lay ahead.